Tonight, a gruesome discovery inside this Colorado funeral home.
Tonight, a developing story in southern Colorado where more than 100 bodies are being improperly stored at a funeral home.
Penrose Funeral Home, where nearly 200 bodies were found improperly stored, is now being torn down.
Without providing too much detail to avoid further victimizing these families, the heir of the funeral home where the bodies were improperly stored.
On October 3rd, 2023, residents living near the Return to Nature funeral home in Penrose, Colorado, became increasingly alarmed by a strong, foul odor coming from the facility. Penrose, a small town located about 35 miles southwest of Colorado Springs, was no stranger to the presence of the funeral home. But the stench that now filled the air was unlike anything they had experienced before. The smell was unbearable, and neighbors grew concerned, unsure of what was causing it. While they knew the building was used for funeral services, they could not shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Eventually, several residents decided to contact the authorities, hoping to get answers. The funeral home was owned and operated by John and Carrie Halford, a couple who had been in the funeral business for years. They had promoted their company as a provider of green burials, appealing to families looking for eco-friendly alternatives to traditional funeral services. However, the disturbing odor coming from their facility raised serious concerns. The Department of Regulatory Agencies, which oversees numerous professional industries in Colorado, including the funeral sector, took immediate action. They reached out to the Halfords, requesting permission to inspect the building and determine the source of the smell. The next day, investigators arrived at the funeral home, expecting to meet with the owners for a walkthrough. However, John Halford did not show up to let them in. Suspicious of the lack of cooperation, authorities took further steps. When their initial request to inspect the premises was ignored, they quickly sought legal permission to enter. Later that night, investigators obtained a search warrant and prepared to enter the facility. What they found behind the funeral home's doors was beyond anything they could have imagined. As soon as officers stepped inside, they were overwhelmed by the overpowering stench of decomposition. The conditions inside were nothing short of horrifying. Bodies were strewn throughout the building, stacked in different areas, some in advanced states of decay. The funeral home was not just cluttered, it was a scene of complete chaos. The floors were covered in a thick, shin-deep brown sludge made up of decomposed human remains, bodily fluids, and blood. The unsanitary conditions were so severe that forensic teams and investigators had to wear full hazmat suits just to enter safely. Each step they took revealed more disturbing discoveries. Bodies that should have been properly stored or buried had instead been abandoned inside the facility, left to decompose in an environment that no one could have imagined existed inside a licensed funeral home. In total, 190 dead bodies were found inside the facility, all in varying stages of decomposition. Some had been there for months, while others had been inside for years. Investigators found records showing that some of the deceased had passed away as far back as 2019. Yet their remains had never been properly handled. The level of neglect suggested that this was not a recent issue, but a long-standing pattern of misconduct by the funeral home's owners. What had started as a simple complaint about a bad smell had now turned into a full-scale criminal investigation. Families who had entrusted the Halfords with their loved ones' final arrangements were now left with devastating questions. How had this been allowed to happen for so long? How many families had been deceived? And, perhaps most disturbingly, what had the Halfords been telling the families of the deceased while their loved ones' remains were left to rot inside the building? The answers would soon begin to unfold, and the discoveries would only become more shocking. John Halford was born in 1980, while his wife, Carrie Halford, was born in 1977. Despite their prominence as funeral home owners, little has been publicly documented about their early lives, including their childhoods and upbringings. What is known is that the couple co-owned the Return to Nature funeral home, a business they established in 2017 in Penrose, Colorado. Their venture into funeral services was not entirely new, as John Halford had long been involved in the industry before launching the business with his wife. John's experience in funeral services extended beyond Colorado. Before moving to the state, he was active in the funeral industry in Oklahoma. His career path was shaped by years of exposure and education in the field. He attended Dallas Mortuary School and identified himself as a third-generation funeral home director. With over 19 years of experience, John portrayed himself as someone deeply knowledgeable in funeral services, using this expertise to establish his own business. His background likely played a significant role in building credibility for Return to Nature Funeral Home when it first opened its doors. The earliest known connection between John Halford and Colorado dates back to 2014, when he was pulled over for speeding in Gunnison County. While this was a minor traffic incident, it indicated that John had been present in the state years before, officially launching his funeral home. His transition from Oklahoma to Colorado suggests he may have been exploring business opportunities or seeking a fresh start in the funeral industry. Whether his move was purely professional or driven by personal reasons remains unclear, but by 2017, he and Carrie had fully settled in Colorado and were actively running their funeral business. Compared to John, Carrie Halford's background is less documented. While she played a significant role in managing Return to Nature Funeral Home alongside her husband, there is little publicly available information regarding her education, previous employment, or early career. Her involvement in the business suggests that she worked closely with John, but whether she had prior experience in funeral services remains unknown. What is clear is that she was present during key events surrounding the case, including the couple's eventual arrest in Wagoner, Oklahoma. The details of John and Carrie's relationship, including how they met and when they married, are not widely recorded in public records. Given John's long-standing career in funeral services, it is possible that they crossed paths through professional or personal connections. Regardless of how their partnership began, the couple was committed to running Return to Nature Funeral Home together. While John had the funeral industry background, Carrie's role, whether administrative or otherwise, contributed to the operation of their business. John and Carrie officially launched Return to Nature Funeral Home in May 2016 and began operating in 2017. They marketed their business as a provider of green burials, emphasizing environmentally friendly funeral services without the use of embalming chemicals or traditional caskets. Their approach aligned with the growing demand for sustainable burial practices. In 2019, they expanded their operations, aiming to serve a broader clientele. At the time, there was little indication that anything was amiss, but behind the scenes, something far more disturbing was taking place within the walls of their funeral home. Emily Miller, a licensed funeral director and the founder of Colorado Burial Preserve, explains the growing demand for green burials, a type of funeral service that emphasizes sustainability and environmental consciousness. She describes green burials as a process where everything is biodegradable, allowing a more natural return to the earth. Emily's Colorado Burial Preserve and Cremation Garden spans 80 acres, offering families a serene setting where they can feel immersed in nature while also receiving traditional cemetery services. She highlights the increasing appeal of this approach as many people seek more eco-friendly alternatives to conventional burials. Beth Karras, a legal analyst and journalist, discusses how another funeral home in Colorado, Return to Nature, was positioning itself within this growing market. She notes how John and Carrie Halford marketed themselves as a married couple with a fresh and modern perspective on funeral services. Their branding focused on a compassionate, alternative approach, appealing to families looking for sustainable burial options. The couple emphasized their dedication to the green burial movement, presenting themselves as trustworthy professionals who understood the emotional needs of grieving families. In a promotional video for Return to Nature, John Halford introduces himself as a third-generation funeral worker, drawing on his family's long-standing experience in the industry. Carrie Halford, on the other hand, openly states that she is not a funeral director, but married into the business. The couple opened Return to Nature in 2017, gaining the trust of numerous families who believed they were receiving compassionate and professional care for their loved ones. One of the individuals who entrusted the Halfords with funeral arrangements was Angelica Stedman. In November 2019, Angelica's daughter Chanel passed away, and she chose Return to Nature to handle both the funeral service and the cremation. When she met John and Carrie, she found them to be sincere, expressing that their professionalism and empathy reassured her during an incredibly difficult time. Angelica recalls feeling comforted by how well they arranged the services, believing she had made the right choice for her daughter's final farewell. Heather DeWolf also used Return to Nature when she lost her eldest son, Zach, in 2020. A family member had recommended the funeral home, and Heather was moved by the way John and Carrie spoke about their services. The couple assured her that they would plant a tree in Zach's name in Pikes Peak National Forest, an idea that resonated deeply with her. She found comfort in the thought that her son's memory would live on in nature, never suspecting that something far more unsettling was unfolding behind the scenes. Christina Page had a similar experience when her son, David Jackson Page, passed away. She entrusted return to nature with his cremation, later keeping his ashes in a necklace while spreading portions across various places he loved. Despite these acts of remembrance, Christina confesses that she never truly felt like she had laid him to rest. Her lingering unease echoed the sentiments of other families who had relied on John and Carrie, unaware of the shocking truth that would later come to light. Embalming was never a primary service at Return to Nature Funeral Home. According to experts familiar with the industry, most of the Halfords' business relied on cremation rather than traditional embalming and burial. However, the couple did not own or operate a crematorium, which meant they had to outsource cremation services to third-party providers. Families who entrusted their loved ones to return to nature expected them to be handled with dignity and professionalism, believing the Halfords were facilitating proper cremations. But investigators would soon uncover a horrifying reality. Proper refrigeration was supposed to be a crucial part of the Halfords' funeral home operation, ensuring that bodies were preserved until cremation could be arranged. However, investigators found that their refrigeration system was not just faulty, it was entirely non-functional. What appeared to be a standard cooling unit was, in reality, nothing more than an empty shell with no working mechanisms. Inside this makeshift storage area, bodies had been placed haphazardly, left to decompose in unspeakable conditions. The site was overwhelming, corpses stacked on top of one another, filling every available space. The discovery raised unsettling questions. Why were John and Carrie Halford holding on to these bodies? What were they doing with them? For families who had believed their loved ones were cremated, the truth was almost impossible to comprehend. Christina Page, who had turned to return to nature after her son David Jackson Page passed away, initially dismissed the possibility that his body could still be in the facility. After all, she had made arrangements with the Halfords over 4 years ago. But her worst fears were confirmed when the coroner informed her that David was, in fact, among the victims found inside the funeral home. She was told that her son's body had been left uncovered and exposed in the building for years. Instead of being stored properly or handled with care, his remains had been tossed into the corner of the non-functioning cooler and buried beneath dozens of other decomposing bodies. As investigators combed through the facility, another appalling detail emerged. Evidence suggested that some families may have never received their loved ones' ashes at all. Bags of concrete mix were found inside the building, along with a machine used to grind the material into a finer consistency. Authorities believe the Halfords engaged in a grotesque scheme, grinding up concrete, placing it in urns or plastic bags, and passing it off as cremated remains. It is suspected that numerous families unknowingly received fake ashes, believing they were laying their loved ones to rest. Angelica Stedman, who had entrusted Return to Nature with her daughter Chanel's cremation, would later make a shocking discovery. She recalled putting what she had been told were her daughter's ashes into a jar, adding water as part of a personal memorial ritual. To her horror, the contents did not dissolve as expected. Instead, the mixture hardened, forming a solid mass, just like cement. The realization was devastating. What she had kept and cherished for years was not her daughter's remains, but something entirely different. Like so many others, she had been deceived in the most unimaginable way. As authorities uncovered the decomposing bodies inside the funeral home, a pressing question emerged. Where were John and Carrie Halford? The couple had seemingly vanished, leaving behind their business and the families who had entrusted them with their loved ones. Investigators attempted to contact John, but he failed to meet with the Department of Regulatory Agencies and the Fremont County coroner at the funeral home. Realizing they were under investigation, John and Carrie made a swift and desperate escape. According to their landlord, the Halfords fled so suddenly that they abandoned everything, even leaving food on the table. A month after the grim discovery, authorities tracked the couple to Oklahoma. The FBI, working alongside local law enforcement, pieced together their movements and determined they were hiding at John's father's house. Federal agents arrived at the residence, and in November 2023, John and Carrie were taken into custody without incident. Their arrest marked a significant turning point in the case, offering a measure of relief to the grieving families who had been misled and betrayed. The state of Colorado charged John and Carrie Halford with an array of serious offenses, including money laundering, forgery, and theft. However, the most damning charges were the 190 counts of abuse of a corpse, each count tied directly to one of the bodies found inside the funeral home. Investigators suspect that the true number of victims could be even higher, as many more individuals had been processed through the funeral home over the years. The scale of deception and negligence was staggering, leaving families desperate for justice. In January 2024, John and Carrie were released on bond, a decision that sparked outrage among the victims' families. The following month, after a court appearance, emotions ran high as Heather DeWolf and Christina Page confronted John outside the courthouse. The two women who had trusted the Halfords with the remains of their sons demanded answers. Their pain and anger reflected the sentiment of many others who had suffered under the Halfords' deceit. By July 2024, the state made the couple an offer: plead guilty to all 190 counts of abuse of a corpse in exchange for a 20-year prison sentence for John and 15 years for Carrie. However, the families of the victims strongly opposed the plea deal, believing it did not fully account for the profound damage caused. Despite this, on November 22, 2024, John and Carrie Halford formally entered guilty pleas to 190 counts of abuse of a corpse. As the case progressed, investigators also revealed that the couple had used customer payments and nearly $900,000 in COVID-19 pandemic relief funds, not for their business, but to finance a lavish lifestyle. Luxury cars, extravagant trips, and high-end purchases were made with money meant to honor the deceased. The Halfords' fate now rests in the hands of the 4th Judicial District Court. If their plea agreement is accepted during the sentencing hearing on April 18, 2025, John and Carrie could each face up to 20 years in prison. For the families who were deceived, no sentence can truly compensate for the anguish they endured, but it may finally bring some measure of justice. What are your thoughts on John and Carrie Halford and the horrifying deception behind Return to Nature Funeral Home? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. If you are new to the channel and like the content, please subscribe and hit the notification bell for upcoming episodes. Your support is greatly appreciated. Until next time, I will see you on another episode of Urban Crime Stories.